If you know anyone who wanted to come here and wasn't able to make it, it'll be on our YouTube channel in a few days. So we started this. So this is the second Sustainable Red Bank. We started this. We began planning it months ago, and we were really asking people kind of what they were interested in hearing as a topic. Recycling ended up being number one pretty much far and away. It's something that people have, I think, a lot of confusion about. And also, it's something that if you're like me, you've been doing it pretty much your entire life. Most people who were born in the 80s have never known anything but recycling. I just recently found out I'm not supposed to throw my dirty pizza boxes in the garbage, which is a bummer because that was me being green for a long time. But it's, there are a lot of things that I think people don't really understand about contaminated recycling, and that was kind of what we wanted to roll into this. At the same time, I don't know if anyone's on social media, my newsfeed has been blowing up with stories like this. I work in the environmental movement, I don't care if you recycle, is this the end of recycling, raw recycling, things like that, where it just seems to really be in the news right now, so this is a really timely thing. If you just read the headlines, it's really depressing. You can kind of quickly resort to despair. It's worth reading more than the headlines, though. The Vox one in particular is really interesting. They kind of go into how recycling, people tend to measure like their individual purity when it comes to environmental things, and in reality there's a lot of broader political stuff that you need to do. But it doesn't let you off the hook for recycling, and a lot of the big actions that get done start in kind of small communities like this one where people kind of band together and decide to do something. For example, in the UK, I don't know, they've started to get a little bit more serious about this, and Waitrose, which is a really big grocery chain, just started doing bulk packaging for a lot of their stuff. So I think that's, right here. So like they've got including like alcohol, rice, cleaning materials, and like pastas and things like that, and you can bring like your own packaging. You don't have to do single-use plastics. So a lot of people are really kind of changing what they do with this. The other thing is that as soon as we posted this on Facebook, we got a comment that it's reduce, reuse, recycle in that order. It's supposed to be intentional. You're supposed to reduce what you're using first, you're supposed to figure out how to reuse things, and then recycling is kind of third on that tier. And that doesn't get covered a lot. So tonight we are going to focus mostly on the recycling part of it. We are going to get into some of the other stuff. But I wanted to bring up a few things that you could look at if you're interested in the reduce reuse thing. There's zero waste is a social media kind of trend going on right now. It's a lot of Instagram accounts where they show you ways that you can cut back on your single-use plastics, or how you can just lower the amount that you're putting into our dumps. Zero waste is a good one. This one, Zero Waste Collective, was really interesting because a lot of the times they recognize that not everyone has access to a grocery store that is affordable and has bulk food, and so they asked for tips, and people give it in the comments what they did to kind of save money and also reduce road waste. There's also things like shopping secondhand for clothing. I have a 1-year-old, and we've gotten everything secondhand, which turns out to be insanely easy because everyone's given way too much clothing when they have a kid. And then, also you can just start looking at what you throw away, razors, plastic razors. We were just talking about plastic toothbrushes. They now do bamboo toothbrushes that are biodegradable, unlike plastic, which just sticks around for forever. And then finally, to do a final little plug, you can use libraries. I went through our catalog, and we've got a ton of materials on zero waste and how to kind of lower your footprint in that regard. Some of it is ebooks, so you don't even have to have the waste of having a book. But we do have a lot of stuff here and in our consortium, so if you're interested in that, that's a good option for you. But for the main thing today, we invited Gary Sondermeyer from Bayshore Recycling. Gary, he worked for 30 years in the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. He served as the agency's chief of staff for 10 years under 5 different DEP commissioners and 6 New Jersey governors. Prior to this, he was the assistant commissioner for the department's permitting programs for 3 years and spent 17 years within the solid waste and recycling program, where he served as the director. He now works at Bayshore Recycling, which is one of the largest recyclers in the state, and he's got a presentation for us, and he's going to kind of go through some of the more finer details, and then after that we'll have a Q&A session, and you can also direct questions to Cliff Keene, who is Red Bank's town director of public utilities. So I'll hand it off to Gary, and we'll get this going. Let's see.
Great. There you go. Terrific. Good evening.
Good evening.
Nice to see everybody. So I have to tell you, we have an association of New Jersey recyclers in New Jersey, and we're very active members at Bayshore. We had our annual golf outing today, and I played in Trenton. We're about as far out on the course as you could when the sky opened. So I am absolutely soaking wet, and I apologize for that. And it took 2 hours to get here. It was like crazy traffic. But I'm very, very pleased to have a chance to speak with you. As Matt said, I spent 30 years with DEP, and I've been with Bayshore for 9 years. And our owners live, you can almost see their house from here in the Highlands, Valley and Frank Monte Calvo. And we are the largest recycling company in the Northeast. We recycle just about everything. And, you know, gosh, curbside stuff, soil, buildings, road, parking lots, bridges, houses. The only thing we don't recycle currently is organics, but we may in the future. So for tonight, I was going to kind of give an overview of kind of everything that's happening in the recycling world, and these discussions are a lot of fun. I'm also vice chair of Sustainable Jersey for the state. How many people are familiar with, right, Sustainable Jersey? And we're up to 450 towns actively involved, and 840 schools, and 331 school districts. So it's extremely exciting. I love being part of that sort of as a side job. And we actually have, from New Jersey's lead, 11 other states that have adopted Sustainable Jersey kind of programs. So it's kind of a movement, and hopefully we'll make it a national thing for all 50 states. So please, questions every time. Let's have a discussion. Let's talk about anything you want to talk about with recycling. I'll give you sort of an overview of stuff in the state and stuff nationally and internationally. Markets right now for recycled materials are the worst in the history of recycling. And I've been involved with this for 40 years. So it's bad. And the three, the chasing arrows of recycling, they mean something. So the first one is what we all do, we put it out, and that's collection. The second arrow is processing, and that's what we do at Bayshore. We take the stuff that you put out at the curb, and we take it back apart and send it out to markets, and that's the third arrow, markets. And you need to do all three to have recycling, or you don't, you have bankruptcy. So the problem today is markets are really bad, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. We have an unprecedented focus. Matt mentioned some things in the media, but the plastics in particular are a tremendous focus right now. I hope everybody has seen a plastic ocean. If not, please get it on YouTube or tag it as your life to plastic. Just incredible single-use plastic bans that are taking place all over the place in the shore communities, the down beach communities. Earlier this week, last week actually, Bayonne and Jersey City banned single-use plastics, and that's pretty huge. They're the two largest towns in Hudson County, and Jersey City this year in the census will surpass Newark as the largest city in the state of New Jersey. So our largest city will have banned plastics. We have the entire European Union has banned plastics by 2021, and last week Canada followed suit. So we're making some progress on single-use plastic bans. New York City has their program in place, which is very important. Food waste recycling we can talk about. I wrote a piece of legislation that's going through the legislature now in the Senate as S1206 is the number. And we can talk about that if you want to in more detail. I just mentioned it's sort of the time for food waste recycling. It's the biggest piece of the waste stream that we have not yet really addressed. Pretty exciting in a way, interesting way, back to plastics. Just about 3 or 4 months ago, all the major petrochemical companies, international waste companies like Veolia and Suez, a lot of other corporations pledged $1.5 billion to address plastic waste in the environment. And so there's two ways of looking at that. I look at it positively, the glass half full. Industry realizes that they really caused the problem. And instead of like being a DEP for 30 years, we're gonna sue everybody and bring them to court and drag them kicking and screaming to admit that they did stuff. So at least on their own, the current was saying, all right, you know, this is a problem now, I'm gonna pledge money to it. I kind of read the pillars of what they said they're gonna do, and it doesn't mean anything to me. Sort of like right now, industry talk, and hopefully we'll put some meat on the bones. But that's a lot of money, you know, and I think we can do a lot of good things with that kind of money, as at least the beginning. So I think that's very significant. And the last one, very exciting. How many people here know about Loop? Good, Loopers. So a small company in Trenton called TerraCycle, and wants to bring back the milkman. And like when I was a kid, you had a milkman and you put out the milk and they came and they changed it. Really taking advantage of the Amazon.com phenomenon, right, where everything comes to the house. So they have most consumer products available now in 100% reusable packaging. And it's you know, hair care products and toothpaste and cleaners, Haagen-Dazs ice cream. It's a big one. And my wife and I like waited up to push the button to like try to be the first Loopers, and we were still too late. We're on a waiting list. So that's good. That's good. You know, it's a pilot and it has a lot of interest. The pilot began about 3 months ago in Paris, France, and the second round was New York City and the greater metropolitan area. And hopefully it's very successful. And by next year, they're hoping to have aisles in our supermarkets where you'll have a Loop aisle, and it'll be 100% returnable packaging aisle. And this really, you know, I'm glad that Matt wanted to focus on reduce, reuse, recycle, because in my 40 years of doing this stuff, we don't spend any time looking at the reduction part. And this is as big a reduction as you're going to get at packaging, and let's eliminate it. You know, when we were in Europe, my wife and I, we're at that age where you got to travel while the body parts still work like the knees and everything. And there are no bags. You know, you don't need a bag. Come on, please. You know, just you know, a cloth bag or something. You know, just hopefully we'll get there as this is high. So a lot of really exciting things happen. I use that word on purpose, exciting, as it doesn't mean anything. You can take it to be positive or you can take it to be negative. It means that there's a lot of stuff happening, and that's not bad, because that's when good things happen out of problems. That's the way I guess I've always seen it happen. I don't know, I don't want to sort of bore you with history, but I think it's important to know the context of recycling in New Jersey. Kind of started as a voluntary activity in 1982 through our Department of Energy, and then we became the first state in the United States to adopt mandatory recycling in 1987. And having lived through that, I was at the table when the debate happened for mandatory recycling, and it was a big deal. It was a really big deal. People didn't want to do it. I started the first recycling program at DEP, where like people should like live and breathe this stuff. They hated my guts because it was change, and people, you know, are resistant to change. And we actually, to make mandatory recycling work, we hired, which is something you never do in government, a public relations firm. We had a campaign. It was kind of corny. It was back to like when I was a kid, the Cowboys and Indians were really popular. So our theme was a sheriff's badge, and it was sort it out before you set it out. Recycling, it's the law. And if you didn't, you know, separate your stuff, the big old sheriff would come and throw you in jail. But we had radio spots, TV spots, billboards. You couldn't be at the Jersey Shore without the plane trailers going by with that slogan and stuff. And eventually it really took place. Initially, the requirement was 3 materials plus leaves, and the only materials that we had markets for were glass containers, aluminum cans, and newspaper. Real key to the law, no one was exempt. And I say that very purposely because still no one is exempt. So any store, mall, location, fast food place, anywhere you go, there should be a provision for recycling. Every office building, and if there isn't, technically you could write that place a ticket. You know, and it's very soft enforcement, but no one is exempt. So as sustainable people, when you're out looking at places, please pay attention for that. You see so many places that aren't recycling still to this day. In 1993, our legislature adopted goals to achieve a 50% recycling rate for the municipal waste stream, the stuff we put at the curb, and a 60% rate for everything, which would include also heavy construction, demolition debris, stuff that normally wouldn't be generated by homeowners. So where are we today? It's still mandatory, and I'm sure you know this. The counties were really designated as the implementing agencies. So each county here in Monmouth County, you have a Monmouth County district recycling plan, and that lays out what materials are required for recycling. And the really good news, I mentioned when we started this, it was only 3 materials. Now the average number of materials required for recycling in New Jersey is 16. So we've really done extremely well at the curbside level with recycling. The goals are the same, 50 and 60%. Unfortunately, back to the waste reduction, generation has not gone down. We still continue to produce more waste every year. And that's really where the rubber hits the road, where we have to improve. We recycled about 14 million tons in the last year that we have stats, which is 216. We have achieved the statutory goal of 61% recycling rate total waste stream, and that's the highest in the country as a state. But we never achieved the municipal waste stream goal. We're at 44%. That's actually the highest rate we've ever achieved. We've exceeded the 60% goal on 4 different years, but we've never made the 50% goal. And really the delta, like where we haven't achieved anything, is food. So that really is the next frontier to try to achieve the 50% goal. As I mentioned, curbside, super successful to a point where it's a problem. Too much recycling. People throw everything in recycling today. You know, it's recycle mania, I call it. You can make up any name you want. The real problem also has been commercial institutional, like I said. It really, it's tough to enforce that. And if we're going to ever achieve those goals, and I know I love the term zero waste, and let me just tell you, it absolutely is achievable technologically. There's no question we can achieve zero waste technologically. The problem is economically. Because if you don't have markets, you don't have programs. And it's unfortunately, we're so big as a country. We mentioned Europe, England, they have like $150 per ton surcharge, penalty tax to go to a landfill, on top of the tipping fee. So it's like $250 a ton. Our average disposal cost in New Jersey is $75 per ton. And the reason is we have so much land. We still have, relatively speaking, cheap landfills. And it makes cutting edge entrepreneurial technology for recycling cost prohibitive. That's what's hard, that's the rub.
So, I apologize, can I?
Yeah, please.
The 44% municipal waste stream, is that based on tonnage?
Yes.
That's not, okay.
Yeah, it's on tonnage.
Okay, not cubic APR.
So you like when we started, your point is really well taken. Everything was in cubic yards.
Right.
Because nobody had scales.
Right.
Then we had a law passed that required any commercial facility to have scales. So like at Bayshore, we have 6 scales. Everything is run with a computer today.
Sure.
You know, so everything is based on tons.
Okay, gotcha.
So what's left in the garbage can after 30 years of mandatory recycling? That's an interesting question. Like when we first did this, every county did huge composition studies, which means dumping out anywhere from 10 to 20 garbage trucks on a parking lot and having young people usually sift through and separate it to figure out what's in there. And every county did that, and then nobody did it for 25 years because we built all the facilities we needed. And Mercer County did one 2 years ago, and it really was interesting. And the main point of it is the number I mentioned. The poster child issue to get at is food waste. About 25% of what's left in the can is food waste. Surprisingly, still a lot of paper. I think that's mainly chipboard. It's like what would be cereal boxes and the other kind of cardboard-like material. Most other stuff is getting recycled. Plastics still high at 16%. So kind of interesting, but food waste really is the focus. For markets, this is Bayshore.
Barry, before you move on, where's electronic recycling fit into that scheme you just had up there?
You know, it's so small, it's a blip on the screen, volumetrically.
Okay.
It's very, very small. But there is a pretty robust consumer electronics recycling industry in New Jersey. Bayshore, so it gets a little bit confusing. Bayshore, because we get so much stuff, like when we put containers out at people's houses, they throw everything in there. So we would get so many TVs and computer parts that we became what's called a large quantity handler, and that's a US EPA term. It means we're a consolidator. So we get this stuff We put it on pallets, we shrink wrap it, we bring it to facilities called demanufacturers, and they actually demanufacture. It's very interesting. It's not like you would think of a garbage facility or a DPW kind of a yard. It's literally people in white lab coats and an assembly line, and they unscrew all the different component parts. And what they're extracting are the pieces that have heavy metals. So in particular, like a TV will have a gun that will shoot the image, and that will have lead, cadmium, or mercury in it, and that's really what you want to extract. And then those component parts go to special processors that smelt that stuff and melt it back down, and they actually reclaim the metals, and they use them again. So it volumetrically tiny, but from a household hazardous waste standpoint, significant, because you don't want that stuff leaching into landfills. You know, if you can take it back and demanufacture it, that's really the way to go.
Okay, thank you.
So just like materials, I thought I'd pause and mention like cardboard. Cardboard used to be like a cream of the crop kind of material, and like for Bayshore, we're huge. We would take all the Walmarts. We would take everything that they have, and we'd lose money on most stuff because there'd be no markets for it. Every piece of clothing at Walmart has a piece of plastic, film plastic on it. You don't make any money on that. You lose money on that. But we would make money on all the cardboard, because the cardboard is single use, and everything that comes to the Walmarts is in a box. Today, some places are charging for cardboard because the market is not good. So like a store-worth material, there's always cardboard. Even that's a little bit shaky right now, but still very worthwhile. Aluminum, still great. You know, that's about a zillion aluminum cans crunched into a bale. 1 and 2 plastic are still good. So this is high density polyethylene mix, which is basically laundry detergent containers, and there's still decent markets for 1s and 2s for plastics. That's one, basically soda bottles that are in bales that Bayshore. Mixed paper, absolutely no market. Very, very difficult. We even put in specialized equipment to try to pull out the cream of the crop of white ledger to be able to have anything to sell. Mixed paper, basically, we get nothing for it. The worst of the worst, unfortunately, is glass. Glass is sand, it's essentially sand, and there is no market for glass to the point where it's a total liability. Yes?
Our cousin lives in New Hampshire, and she said recently they found glass is trash up there.
Yeah.
Because their their closest recycler closed down.
Yeah.
And I think the next closest recycler is actually here in New Jersey.
Yeah.
But I went to the Ocean County yard with my students in this fall, and the man who ran the tour there said that they were experimenting with breaking the glass down back into the sand and using it in place of diatomaceous earth in your pool filter. Like, do you guys experiment with those kinds of things too through Bayshore?
Yeah, and that's really kind of the point I was making about the economics. You know, the problem, we worked with a company called Andela Glass, which is in the port of Coinmans, which is sort of like Port Newark in Albany, you know, for New York State. And they pulverize glass to the point where they can use it as an admixture in Portland cement. Now that's a dynamite market. The problem is with glass, it's all niche markets. You know, really beautiful, decorative stuff you might put in a shower. Yeah, but how many of them can you sell?
Right.
You know, in the real ticket, like spending all my time at the state, the interesting clash we always had was like the environmental side of the house against the Department of Transportation. Because in some states, like out west, if you go in Arizona and you're riding at night, the roads kind of glisten because it's got glass in it, it's glass fall. And here we have not been able to get, because we have the freeze thaw that they don't have, we haven't been able to get the Departments of Transportation to agree to hire admixtures of glass, because there we could use, that. You know, that's the kind of thing that's a real market. And Portland cement is a real market. But they haven't been able to take off with this concept. So I don't know the pool filter concept, but that makes density. That's the kind of stuff you want to be able to find, because it's sustainable, because there's a lot of pools. You know, but that's the rub. You kind of hit it. I'm glad you brought that up. It's a great example. Yes?
As for the cardboard, is that just because supply has grown? Like, is it less valuable now that the supply of cardboard has grown?
You know, the biggest problem is single-stream recycling. You know, we made it simpler and simpler and simpler through the years, and that's great for getting more stuff. But like, not to be gross, but you know, picture you have a big party, and you have soda for the kids, you have beer, you have wine. Do people really clean that stuff out? Are they really washing all of it? Absolutely not. So now you mix all that stuff with the cardboard and the paper, and what do you get? You get mush. By the time it comes to Bayshore, it's decomposing already. It's falling apart. And like any other product, like what do you want to buy? You want to buy a good product. You don't want to buy junk that's decomposing. So not to be gross, but just to make the point, that's the problem. So the cardboard is so compromised. We happen to have, because not everybody went to single stream, so we have all of Somerset County coming to us at Bayshore, and that's still dual stream, and it's night and day. It's night and day, the quality of that stuff, compared to like we take Woodbridge, 5th largest town in the state, it's all single stream. And it's contaminated stuff. So that's one of the major big public policy issues we have to face, is do we go back to dual stream? And that's something like in California, they have a piece of legislation that's a draft out there to require towns to go back to dual stream. So that's the kind of stuff, that's where we're with, when you have like a crisis, and really recycling's in crisis, it's true, it is. When you have a crisis, you have to relook at everything, and you have to make some big decisions, and they're the kinds of things that we have to think about. Yes?
What's on the number 1 plastics, like the bottles versus like the very
Speak loudly, please. My hearing is, and one of my hearing aids zapped on the golf course we get around. So I got half a head, sorry.
The number 1 plastics,
Yes.
with like the berry containers and like some of the salad, like clamshell packaging versus the water bottles.
Yeah.
Like here, we can't recycle the clamshells. We can only do the bottles. We'll
Right.
talk about like why that is.
Really, for convenience, I think of marketing. So if you're a county government and you have a county facility, then you want tried and true stuff. So I've heard a lot of the counties say we will only take PET water bottles, polyethylene terephthalate, that's in polyethylene tube material, and nothing for 3 to 7. At Bayshore, we stay 3 to 7. So the answer to the question of what can I recycle is whatever your market says you can recycle. So I'll give you like an example, our DPW in Woodbridge, we're like right next door. We share a property line. And the recycling coordinator gave me a call and said, you know, I've been making my weirdo list. All the things that she gets asked that are really interesting materials, can't you? And I said, well, send it to me. So there were 34 items on her weirdo list. And we took it, we sent it to all our markets, the places that we send material. I said, you know, can you take any of this stuff? And they could take 20 out of the 34. But up till that point, because nobody asked, it all went to garbage. So it's really a function, and I know one of my themes is recycling is way too complicated.
Yeah, it is.
Way too complicated. We have to figure out how to simplify it, because it gets to your point. Like, well, how come it's a 1 and it's a clamshell thing and it's supposed to be recycled and you won't take it? You know, because there is no real good reason. There really isn't. It's a matter of, like, if they had a weirdo list and it came to us, we'd say, well, we'll take it. So it depends.
But there's a lot of miscommunication. Like, for example, even here, I work at the library and I try to get the staff to recycle, but I was told by a DPW guy that, oh, don't bother, it all gets put together anyway. So I'm not sure what gets recycled. And then, like, for example, bottles that have tops on, plastic bottles. A lot of times the caps are put on the bottles, but I've been told that then they won't do anything with the bottles if the cap is on there, because the cap isn't recyclable. And I find that people are really confused about,
it's the truth. And the unfortunate answer is it is confusing and it's not uniform. The problem is it's not uniform. So to take your point one step further, every county I mentioned has a master plan. And that master plan says what you must recycle or you can get a ticket. And that's like the 16 items. Then beyond that, any town can adopt a municipal ordinance. And I'm like the biggest culprit because I lead the Waste Management Action Area for Sustainable Jersey. So I want towns to do that. I want towns to work to find markets and go beyond those 16 things. But then people get confused. Can I recycle? Can I not recycle? So you're just like, the poster child thing I say is caps on or caps off. And most people will say, well, caps off. You know, at Bayshore we tell people caps on, but deflate the bottle. And it's a function of what your machinery is. It's all so sophisticated today. Our plastic line has optical scanners. And the line moves like faster than at my old age I can run. It goes so quick. And the optical scanners can tell the difference instantaneously between a 1 and a 2 and blow a differential stream of air, and one goes one way and one goes the other. That's the kind of thing you're talking about. So depending on the technology you have, you will say caps on or caps off. So once again, it depends. And that doesn't work in the public sector because people have lives, right? They do very complicated things in their lives, and recycling is just a little piece of life. And if you can't make it simple, they get confused.
Well, in England, you mentioned, I mean, it's an island, so they only have so much space, and they have different colored bags. And if you put something in one of the bags that shouldn't be, let's say, in the pink bag, they won't pick up the trash. They'll just leave it there until it's corrected.
And we just had a really cool demonstration project. More than a demonstration, it was a county-wide project in Burlington County where they did the exact same thing. And I hired a bunch of summer interns to go and do inspections, and it was extremely well done. So if you want to see an example, we just had them speak. We had our 10th anniversary of Sustainable Jersey last Friday, and we had a great conference. We had 650 people come. I was so excited. And one of the presentations I ran a session was Burlington County, and I talked about what they did. They did the exact same thing, and so well done. You know, everybody got like happy warnings.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't like this big brother thing. You know, you're going to go to jail. It was like you made a mistake, and here's what. And they had little boxes where they checked the box of what you had in there that you shouldn't have in there, and you didn't get in trouble until like 4 times making a mistake. So like really well designed.
But it was educational.
Yeah,
I mean,
extremely. And there are the 2 things.
Because I
It's
think
really-
we're probably all in this room unsure about some things.
There's
Yeah.
no question about pizza boxes, yes or no?
No.
Yeah, we take them. And I recycle all my pizza boxes. I just make sure that I don't have too much grease and cheese that's left in a box, and it's 100% perfectly recyclable. But again, it depends on where the stuff's going and what they tell you. That's what we tell people. But you can see why it's confusing.
Right,
And then you
like
get
they
the
say
plastics,
anything
there's
with
7 of them,
food,
right?
they can't.
So it's another thing that we have to do is figure out a way to make it a little more uniform and less confusing. Yes, ma'am?
What I wanted to share to the room is that the Monmouth County Recycling Center has an app that you can download called Recycle Coach, and you put in your address, and I guess they figure out where you are, and they tell you when you have your pickups, and they also have where you could just plug in whatever item that you have that you're not sure of, and it'll tell you if it's recyclable or not.
And Recycle Coach, we really talked it up a lot in Sustainable Jersey, and we got the EP to buy it for all 565 towns.
Great.
So it's free of charge to every town, and
Yeah.
it's free to individuals. And it used to be My Waste, and they changed it to Recycle Coach. And you're right, it has great stuff on it, and you can
Right.
get different versions of it that'll even tell you household hazardous waste collection days, bulky waste collection days,
Yes.
like to your
They
point,
get the
what isn't
reminders.
recyclable.
Yeah,
So it's a great app.
I use the app, and it's very helpful.
Good point, thank you for bringing it up.
So, there's a couple things I want to ask and talk about. First is, please let me know if my guys are not separating recycling and garbage correctly. I've had some issues with it. We do have an issue in the downtown area,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that most cities or municipal places that have a mix and litter lockers, people are not sure which hole to put the garbage in and which hole to put the recycling in. So most of the time, the recycling side of the trash can winds up in the garbage because it is mixed with pure garbage. And separating it is very time consuming and just isn't gonna happen, especially with the amount of garbage we have. But in a municipal building, they better be separating.
Yeah,
Please
well,
let me know if
before I
they're
make a
not.
big deal with the staff, I want to make sure that indeed
Yes.
it is being
We'll-
recycled.
I'll make sure I address that tomorrow.
Okay.
And then I have a question about glass. So in some states, they still have deposits where you pay an extra 5 cents and you go to a machine and you dump the thing in and then you get your nickel back or whatever it is. How do you feel about that system? Is that something maybe we should be pushing for in New Jersey now that glass is worth nothing?
So I'll tell you sort of the story of that. 32 years ago, we had the great bottle bill debate, and it kind of raged in the legislature. And there's a very powerful lobby that you probably never heard of called the New Jersey Food Council. Okay. And they represent all the supermarkets and fast food restaurants or stores and restaurants in the state. So they're very powerful, and they were dead set against bottle bill because 32 years ago, we had no technology. So they literally had to dedicate portions of their stores, which are already crammed with goods, to take stuff back. So they fought it down. And what we have in its place, and the argument, the public policy argument was always that a bottle bill is just limited essentially to bottles and cans. We created a program called Clean Communities, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which is our litter abatement program. That's our replacement for a bottle bill because it's more comprehensive and it deals with all paper, all litter, and collection of material. So it was always viewed as more comprehensive than a bottle bill. To your point, I think it's come all the way around, and now we should consider looking at bottle legislation because the technology is great. We have a little place up in the Adirondacks in Podunk in Chestertown, New York, and our little shopping center has all the with like vending machine things that you
Right.
put everything in, and you go in and you get the your money and you buy next stuff with it. Right? It's great. It works.
Yeah.
So we should probably reconsider it. And these are the kinds of things that our legislature needs to start, because that has to be legislative.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, but there was a good reason why we didn't do that.
It makes
And
sense.
arguably, we did something more comprehensive. And I think Clean Communities is an absolute model. The sort of public policy, what you really want is producer responsibility legislation, which makes people that cause the waste pay for it. And Clean Communities is one of the few we've ever had. It's 0.000.3 of every penny of sales of all the litter producing industries, cigarette companies, bottlers, beer companies, all goes in a centralized pot. It's about $24 million a year that gets collected. And that money gets kicked out to all 567 towns based on road miles to clean the streets. And that's why it's Clean Communities. So industry is actually paying for that. And that's the way it should be. So Clean Communities, I think, is a very good program, but I don't know why we couldn't supplement it by having a bottle bill. I think we can have both.
Right, I agree.
Yeah, so we should look at that. We should look at that. All right, so we've actually, this is great. Please keep asking questions. This is where discussions are fun and educational for me too. So what's the problem? I kind of went through a lot of this already, but I want to make sure we cover everything. I mentioned single stream, dual stream. I don't think we really have to talk about it anymore. You know what happened in China, everybody. We don't need to spend time on that. We have the green fence and then the green sword. And it's kind of like, you ever see the movie The Natural? And if you remember, Robert Redford gets shot at the beginning of the movie, and then later in his life he's reflecting and he says, I should have seen it coming. I should have seen it coming. We should have seen this coming. You know, what happened is the cost to send stuff internationally was so cheap, all of our markets closed. Somebody mentioned glass earlier. You know, we had the epicenter of glass in South Jersey. Wheaton Glass was huge all over Cumberland County, and they're gone. They're completely gone. All of our paper mills are gone. They couldn't compete. And all the eggs went in one basket, and then because of the kind of type of government they are, they could shut the door, and they shut the door, and everybody's like, ugh. And now the other Asian companies, they call them the Asian Six, are following suit. So India, Malaysia, Vietnam, you know, and it's just getting worse. It's not getting better. So we need new capacity. We talked about how confusing it is. So we already hit that point. Plastics in particular, and like even to try to do it right. So yogurt containers, right? I've seen them as 4s. I've seen them as 5s. And like I use this Light and Lively stuff because I'm kind of chubby, and it's got the 3 circles, and there's nothing inside. It's like, you know, an artist formerly known as Prince. It has no name. There's no number. What is that? So it just makes it so confusing. It's a shame. And you get the point. Disconnect. We got all this stuff, right? All the supply, and nobody wants to buy it. And don't want to buy it. You don't have the 3 circles, right?
Why isn't it mandatory for industry to put the recycle?
It really is.
But they can get away with it?
Yeah,
Sometimes it's so small you can't.
And you hit on another great point. Why can't we work together? Why can't we just work together? And it's crazy. The one that makes me nuts, you know, in the middle of all this, there's plastic packaging now, like the one I think of as Tropicana orange juice. So it's a polyethylene terephthalate recyclable item, and they put a decorative sleeve over the top that's a different polymer. So it's not a 1 anymore. Our machines read it as a 5, and it kicks it to the waste pile. The manufacturing industry could care less, not to be disrespectful, I never am, but they really could care less. And we've had like knockdown, drag outs, so why can't you, just do it? And they said, whatever the public wants is what we're gonna do.
But if the public knows and the public doesn't buy that product because of what they're doing, a lot of it is education. And
It really
then
is.
the business will change.
And that's why something like the TerraCycle thing with Loop is so exciting to me. If you can flip the norm, the societal norm, and make it reusable packaging, and make it, unappealing to do all that kind of nonsense.
Who needs that?
Right, then they'll wake up, and then, so that's what it takes. And that's why, even in times of crisis, I mean, if you really think about it, when things really change is times of crisis. Normally it was war. Right? Normally wars produce massive societal change. Obviously we're not in a war, but we're in a tough time. And I'm hoping that we get good stuff out of it.
Yeah.
And I'll sort of get to a punchline of that a little later. We mentioned the economics of recycling. Just put a number on it. Up till maybe, 2.5 years ago, we were still paying towns 10 to 20 bucks a ton to have the benefit of getting your stuff, because we could make money on it. And now, because of the situation, like the lowest price that we could charge is $60, $65 a ton. That's crazy. In 2 to 3 years, you work for the town. Think about your municipal budgets. I mean, mayors every year have to balance the budget under a cap.
Just to let you guys know, there's a clause in the law for haulers that allows them to reopen contracts if there's a significant change in the thing. And the way that the law is written, recycling and solid waste is almost the same exact thing.
Right.
So the hauler in Red Bank has reopened. We are in negotiations now to pay a percentage of the tipping fees for recycling, without calling them, I don't know if they're so-called tipping fees for recycling, but
that's reality.
It's reality now, and in the next contract that we sign, we will not be able to have a 50% agreement where we pay part and they pay part. It will have to be that we pay all of the tipping fees, otherwise no one will bid on our project.
No one will bid.
And that is actually happening to several towns right now. So the cost for every homeowner in every place in New Jersey is going to be increased for recycling. There's
Absolutely
nothing
correct.
we can do about that unless there are systemic changes. I attended a really nice seminar at the municipalities, Republic Recycling put it on. And I know they're a competitor. But
we all work together, so they bring all this stuff to us.
So one of the great things that they did was they talked about the biggest contaminants that they see in recycling.
Yeah.
And I definitely wanted to ask you what kind of things you see in recycling. I want to say their number 1 was like plastic straws, and number 2 was water, and then they had diapers, I think, as another thing that people wanted. And they called it, you're calling it recycle media, they were calling it aspirational recycling.
Yeah.
So people really want to help, absolutely. I want to do good. So my old tennis shoes have rubber at the bottom of it. Let's throw that in there. The garden hose that I'm going to throw away, that's made of recycled materials, right? Just chuck that in there. Panes of glass. Right, that's another one. I don't know if you guys, it sounds like you guys might be able to handle it.
You get everything.
But here in Monmouth County, we can't do panes of glass. So what can you do?
Garden hoses is probably our number 1 consistently.
Okay.
For some inexplicable reason. We probably could open a sports store.
Just with garden
Get
hoses.
ball, that's incredible baseball bats. Well, it's wood.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a, like, well, wood's not a recyclable material.
Right.
Ketchup masks, like hockey sticks, pucks, balls, and bowling balls. We get a lot of bowling balls. No, I really don't even understand. Pool liners.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Pool liners. The worst one, the one that bothers me actually, are needles and syringes.
Oh, sure.
We get literally shopping bag canisters full of needles and syringes. And it's the same thing. It's like, if you're an at-home diabetic and you're looking at the thing and you're saying, well, one piece is metal, the other piece is plastic, and to recycle it. So again, the people they're not being malicious. I don't believe that in any way, shape, or form, but it's really dangerous because everything in high-tech recycling is machinery. And they get stuck in the machines. We have to stop the machines because of plastics, largely.
Yeah.
And have people climb in them and pull everything out twice a day. to be able to keep the machines running, and they get stuck with needles.
Right.
Not cool.
And I will say, as someone who's done their own allergy shots at home, there's not a lot of information that's coming from the allergists, the doctors, and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, here, good. Put them in a, what they tell me to put it in, an old container of laundry soap.
Yeah.
One of those. Put them in there, and then, okay, well, when that's full, what do I do with it? I don't know, check with the hospital. Like, they didn't even give me any real information.
And interestingly, we talked about the bottle bill.
Yeah.
There was legislation to require the pharmacies that sell them to take them back. And, we came pretty close, but for the same reasons. We don't want the liability, and, we have shoppers in here, and, we did it with batteries, the Dry Cell Battery Management Act, all the jewelry stores and stuff, they take the batteries back, and it works, so we need to revisit those kind of things.
And you mentioned climbing in machines, so about July of last year, so it's almost been a year, Red Bank residents woke up to the realization that they can no longer put plastic bags in their recycling stream, and it happened, I guess, in a meeting with recycling coordinators from all over Monmouth County.
Sure.
They went into this meeting on let's say a Tuesday, and by Tuesday afternoon they were told that if there's a single bag in there, they're not taking it, and all the haulers know this and everything like that. So the very next pickup, people were very surprised to see that the recycling was still in the curb, especially in the town where we pick it up every other week instead of every week. Are you guys seeing that same problem? Has it been reduced? I know, I think we take our recycling, our hauler takes their recycling to you. Has that problem started to been alleviated? Or?
It really, there's so much material we take from 30 towns, so I think we take from 750,000 people.
Okay.
So you have to have systemic change.
No, I mean, as a whole though, I think most people are starting to stop throwing their bags. Or do you still have a huge?
Yeah, we still have tremendous numbers of plastic bags. They are still a problem. And I think the more towns that ban that stuff, the better.
Okay.
And back to your point of sort of building momentum to get people to flip the norm. But we're not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
We're not there yet. And plastic bags they really are a problem.
So we've, and again, this probably isn't news to anybody in this room, internally, of course, we've had conversations about a potential ban, and we've been told that the state is working on that at the state level. Is that something you know anything about?
I worked at a legislative front for 40 years.
Absolutely.
It's
never going to happen.
They say it's like making sausage, and it's worse than that. It's like making scrapple, if that's worse. I don't know. But it is such an amazing process. So we got a piece of ban legislation all the way through the legislature and on the governor's desk to sign. And in this case, hindsight's 20/20. The environmental community came out with, at the time, it was a pretty brand new governor who was pro-environment, and they said, don't sign it because it's not comprehensive enough. Because it was only on plastic bags. They wanted straws and the single serve packaging. And that was a deadly mistake. Because when you added, remember I mentioned the Food Council earlier? The Food Council never supports an environmental bill, and they supported the bag ban. And once you added straws and you added the other in there, the single serve stuff, they said we can't. It's like too controversial to our membership. And that's who they represent. So is it completely dead? No, but boy, I don't know. Because like understanding how the lobbying stuff works, the Food Council is directly connected to the State Chamber of Commerce, which is directly connected to the New Jersey Business and Industry Association, which is connected to the Commerce and Industries. They all band together because they represent the private sector interests. That's their job. That's their job. So we had a bill, and we lost the bill. So until it comes back again, but it's so fickle. It's so fickle that it becomes societally unacceptable, and people have really had it, then the politics can change. I wrote that piece of food waste legislation 5 years ago, and it is the ultimate roller coaster. And the last version that came out, you can't make this stuff up. There were exemptions, because people lobby to get exemptions. And a lot of times legislators don't really know. And they put this stuff in, they put in an exemption that exempts all 21 counties. So here's a bill to ban food, and then they'll look at it, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, really? Please, please.
Wow.
So it's a fascinating process.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think my advice, for what it's worth, as a person, not representing anybody, is if the town would consider a ban, do it.
Okay.
If you're gonna wait for the state, you're gonna wait for a long time.
Okay.
Because it's unfortunately too controversial.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
All right, we talking about, well, and the one thing, just to say this, we need to restore domestic markets. And unfortunately, it's like the perfect storm, and this is no disrespect at all, but we have a Republican president, and environmental issues have never really been toward the top of those agendas. That's, a factual statement. So it ain't gonna happen in this time to have incentives. So we have a Democratic governor, Governor Murphy, who might bring some things back. The original recycling law had a recycling tax. It was $1.50 a ton originally. It went into a pot, and it got redistributed. 35% of that pot originally went to private sector business recycling loans to build mills. We have to revisit that. Like you have to have something to bring people, because people are like freaked out. Why am I going to invest money in something that's going to tank? You have to make it worthwhile, right?
Have you looked into any of the chemical recycling? Like the plastic break down through the chemical processing instead of just like the shredding?
Right.
I know out in Oregon they have a fairly new facility that is pretty comprehensive for all the plastics.
Mm-hmm.
And it really reduces the need to sort.
Are they recovery chemical, you mean?
Yeah, like they're breaking down the plastic completely, and they could take any plastic
Yeah.
and just recover the raw materials. And there's also like another one that is changing the initial product so it's easier to break it down and recover with less energy too. But that's going to take a lot longer to implement.
There's a lot of entrepreneurial technology that does work, like tires, as an example, which is one I'm more familiar with. That there are cryogenic, which means freezing and cracking, and pyrolytic, which means oxygen-starved, basically melting of tires. And at the end of the day, you can recover the elemental chemical that went into the rubber manufacturing.
Yeah.
And you can also create carbon black, which is a tremendous air pollution media. It's a filter. And that's what you would put in control technologies for incinerators to catch the bad stuff. So those technologies work, but they're not economic. And it comes back to what I said, it's not a technological problem, it's a financial problem. And what we don't have are sustaining, I use that word for sustainable, sustaining incentives that make these things work over time. So like in Burlington County, we have the Rutgers Eco Complex, really cool facility. It's built at the total slope of the Burlington County landfill, and it's dedicated to entrepreneurial environmental technology to come and be able to set up shop and do experiments and figure out their technology. And that they could do, but then to take it from that step to the commercial step, there's nothing.
That's where TerraCycle started, right?
TerraCycle, and they're still on track.
Yeah.
Now they're international, so there's hope. But they really, I haven't known of a magic bullet, really. So it's great that Oregon has, keep doing it, and make it the magic bullet, but it's not quite there yet. All right, so what can we do? So again, we talked about a lot of this already. The ban stuff, which I think is important. You mentioned education. If there was a number one in my mind, it's education. It's education. We mentioned incentives. We need more leadership from the state. And more than anything, the thing that's most upsetting right now, being a real candidate, is there's no discussion. There's nobody taking ownership and responsibility for this issue, and we need to do that. So as an example, there's every county has the master plan, and they have an advisory body. It's called the Solid Waste Advisory Council, or SWAC. There's also a state SWAC. And I got named to the state SWAC 5 years ago by Governor Christie. Real nice, you know, I got this real nice letter and everything, and I was named, and we haven't had one meeting. And my term has already expired. And that's the Quality Council, just to call it a name, of who should be talking about this stuff and giving advice to the governor, to the legislature, to the state DEP. And we don't meet. Like, it's like we don't exist. And I've been screaming to, like, can we please, and we don't, who cares about whether my term's expired? Just, the state has to call you together. So please call us together. So we start doing it. We work with Senator Bob Smith. If you're familiar with Bob Smith, he's the head of the State Senate Environment Committee. He's great. He's really progressive, and we talked to him, and we had a bill this close, but we were kind of late, to create a state recycling market development council. And it would be real small, just like 8 people who would, you know, take 6 months to come up with great ideas to feed in to start the ball rolling here. But it didn't make it on the calendar legislatively. So, you know, and if you don't have the backing of government, then it's totally ad hoc, and frankly, you're not taken very seriously. So we need to have a discussion. Should we go back to dual stream? We talked about that. This is the California bill that's out there. Like, don't hit me with a lightning bolt or throw tomatoes. Should we stop collecting some stuff? We have to at least talk about that. We have to at least talk about it. You know, I don't want to do that. None of us want to, like, real believe in this, right? So we want to do more, not less. But are we accomplishing anything if glass has no market? Because we all are expending significant resources to wash stuff out, because most people really do try to wash out. So we're using a lot of water, a lot of energy. We're washing stuff out, we're putting it at the curb, a separate truck has to come pick it up. It's the heaviest stuff in all the recycling stream. You bring it to a processor, and if you can't do anything to it, he sticks it in a landfill. You know, and it's like, we have to at least have these discussions. I'm not saying stop collecting glass, I'm not saying that at all, but we should at least be talking about it. Like, if we can't find markets, put more in the road, right? Find more entrepreneurial things that we can use that are real markets, then we gotta do something else, because you can't run these things into the ground, because then the recyclers go out of business. But our company, with Valerie and Frank, with Bayshore, we're very vertically integrated, you know, so our core business is taking non-hazardous petroleum contaminated soil, and we have it's called a low temperature thermal desorption unit, where we decontaminate that soil and then we use it for beneficial use. That's our core business. That and buildings, roads, parking lots, and bridges, concrete, asphalt, brick, and block. It's called the Class B recycler in New Jersey. That's our core business. So fortunately, those markets are good, because we have a lot of that stuff. But we run a 1,000-ton-a-day facility for the curbside stuff, and that's not doing so good. And people who just have that, unfortunately, are going out of business. So if you don't do something, then you've got nobody taking it. You see what I'm saying? Like, I'm a real positive guy. I'm not saying like there's a death spiral, but that's the kind of stuff that can happen, right? If you're not careful and we don't have the discussion, right? We got to have a discussion. This is a great discussion. We should be doing this with the legislature. And to that point, the Senate Environment Committee and the Assembly Environment Committee every summer have a special session in August. It's a joint legislative session, which is very unusual. It's August 15th. It'll be somewhere down here at the Jersey Shore, and it'll be dedicated this year to recycling. So that's good. We're making some headway. And it's not like, you know, it's what you said at the beginning, Matt, like, oh, I have to pick up the newspaper, right? Recycling is dead. Well, it's not dead. It's far from dead. It's not going to be dead. But we need to jump in, and we need to get some stuff going. So that's exciting. Sustainable Jersey, you know, I just wanted to put a piece in here, because a lot of times we feel helpless, like what can we do, right? And Sustainable Jersey, I truly believe in with all my heart. It's a great program. This is the Waste Management Action Area that I oversee for the state. These are all the different things that you can do to earn Sustainable Jersey points. If you're not familiar with Sustainable Jersey, it's a 100% voluntary program. And it's kind of like playing Monopoly. you get points for doing things, and if you get enough points, you get a prize. And the prize is a certification. So if you get 150 points, you're bronze certified. If you get 350 points, you're silver certified. And last couple of years, we, for the first time, put together a gold program, which is like the gold standard. It's very tough to get gold. But it's so popular. Again, 450 towns are very, very actively involved. And the more points we have, ceremonies where we, give out certificates, and it's great. It's like when you win a Monopoly game, you feel good, right? Well, towns really do so many great things, and they can get points for it. So it really is terrific. If you're not involved and you really want to try to make a difference, please consider joining your green team. As a core thing to start, the first thing you have to do is create a green team. And a green team is a combination of this room and folks from the private sector. Bayshore, I'm vice chair of the Woodbridge Green Team, representing the private sector. DPW folks are incredibly important on the green teams, and you can really make a difference in your town. You really can, and really address the kind of issues like you said, real practical stuff. It's tough downtown. Right? You have different containers, people get confused, you need more education, and working with a green team and with your Chamber of Commerce, you can put together plans to make a difference in your town.
We can have businesses on the green team too?
I'm sorry?
We can have businesses involved in the green team?
Absolutely, absolutely, and I love we get the high school kids.
Yes, them
So
too.
we try to get it from all levels, the kids involved,
Yes.
the businesses, the DPW, teachers, regular citizens, environmental, not-for-profit organizations, anybody and everybody. I'm not going to go through, this is the gold standard. Are you considering the gold standard?
We won a grant for EDF fellow, and we're working on the gold standard for
Well, there's only energy, waste.
Thank you.
There's energy, waste, and we haven't even finished water yet.
Right.
Right.
So, and I kind of wrote the waste one, and unfortunately, it's almost too hard.
Yes, it's extremely difficult.
So we might have to revisit it. The people who actually are in the program are PhDs, it's really smart, and they want really high, because it's supposed to be a sustainable state. So it's that weird balance. You want to make it meaningful, but you don't want to make it impossible either.
Right.
Right, so I think we have to tweak it a little bit.
Absolutely.
But it's
And honestly, if we can be gold certified in every category you guys create, we would try. But there are certain limitations to what we can do, so,
the hardest, I'll just tell you what it is real quick. We put together a very high recycling rate. So you have to achieve a 65% total waste stream rate and a 55% rate minus leaves.
That's why I asked you, yes,
And
that's why I asked you if it was a tonnage or if it was a cubic yard. I mean, that's kind
Because
of
we got into this academic area. I'm from a tenement downtown Patterson, there were no trees. So we can't get any credit. There were still, to this day, we went back a couple years ago, there's still no trees. There was one little plot of grass that it was like the median, so they could shoot the prisoners in front of the jail, there would be a space where they could sit there. That's the only grass I saw as a little boy, I swear to you, it's still there beside County Jail on Main Street. You go to suburbia, and it's wide open spaces and the trees fall and they naturally compost. So they don't get credit. So the only people that get credit are really the suburban towns that collect the leaves. So,
we collect a lot, so we could really use those points and throw them in.
maybe we gotta revisit the leaves. I don't know, but
Leaves and brush, give me brush.
the other one that's really hard, because again, whoever mentioned, I think you started with it, Matt, reduce. We set a standard of reducing total generation 2% per year for 3 years, so 6% reduction. And a lot of towns in Middlesex County, because that's where we are, so I looked at that, have been getting close to that, so you can do it. But it's another really, really hard standard. And then beyond that, somebody had mentioned, or you brought up, I think consumer electronics, my bugaboo is the toxicity element of what's in the house. So to me, household hazardous waste collection is so incredibly important, because that's the stuff you don't want. You want it to go to the proper places. And most towns have DPWs. So to get the gold standard, you have to collect at least 4 materials and have a permanent location to bring it, so residents can bring it. You know, it can't be like 4 times a year, you know, I mean, you forget, you got other plans. It's gotta be a regular opportunity to drop the stuff off, use motor oil, antifreeze, what do you call it, empty pesticide containers, you know, there's like all kinds of materials that are out there. I might have a list. Okay, the batteries, used motor oil, I mentioned the rechargeable batteries, the different kinds of paint, latex and oil-based paints. Get it out of the waste stream. So you have to.
So it's funny, we take latex paint, most people don't know that. And what we do is we mix it all together and it becomes one color that we play in our water treatment plant with every year.
Yeah.
So I'm not even,
Yeah.
I'm not exaggerating. So you go in there, it's like the same color, and what it is people's waste all mixed together. And it always comes out the same color. It's not brown either, which it would surprise me.
A really cool county example, like if you want to look up a website that's really, you know, great stuff, is the Atlantic County Utilities Authority. And they used to collect all the latex paints, and they made 2 colors. They called them their eco paints, and it was battleship gray and like earthy green or something.
Okay, yeah.
And they would give it away.
Yeah.
You know, it's like they'll repackage it and then give it away to people, and they'll okay with those colors.
There you go.
You know, it was okay. It was free paint. Yeah, so this is sort of like just a summary of the stuff, and this is great. I mean, you don't have to say this stuff because we already talked about all of it. You know, it's technology exists to recycle everything. It's the economics of the problem. We really need to, and this is something, not to sort of bore you with the interrelationships of government. Nationally, US EPA has taken a very important hands-on role with hazardous waste. And that's subtitle C of the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. The garbage end is subtitle D, and the EPA has done nothing. And I don't mean that like in a disrespectful way. They delegated that to the states. So the states have had responsibility for solid waste planning and for recycling. But EPA came out, interesting timing, really interesting timing, with a tremendous national strategic plan 3 years ago, which is the National Sustainable Materials Management Plan. And that's what, as sort of like a commercial, we shouldn't be talking about waste, we should be talking about materials. Sustainable materials, we should be manufacturing sustainable materials. We should be recycling sustainable materials. And that's, so if you want to look up a cool plan, it's like not like one of these meaning of life things that you can't read. You know, I think it's like 20 pages long, and it's got 4 basic priorities. Food waste is a poster child. Reducing packaging, focusing on construction material, construction and demolition debris, because that's 100% recyclable. You shouldn't throw out any of that stuff. And getting the states to measure recycling in a same way. Okay. All 50 states measure it differently. So it's a really good like direction, and that's needing that kind of leadership. You know, we just got to get the state re-engaged. New Jersey, like, you know, was cutting edge on everything. We got to get back to that. We just have to get back to it. We got to get the attention, and we have to get leadership. So we do have examples like San Francisco is nearing 80% diversion rate, and that's like a funny thing. Zero waste, like that is not going to happen. I mean, technologically it can happen. And what people say they're trying to, getting towards zero waste, what they're really getting to is diversion from landfilling. So what they count in there is going to waste energy incinerators, and that's not recycling.
May I ask about clothes? I was told that because even you try to buy cotton, whatever, today, there's almost always a little plastic in all of our clothes, and that the landfills, it never breaks down now. Clothing. Is there any way to do anything with recycling of clothes? Because that's supposed to be one of the biggest problems, I understand.
Yeah, so there's a couple of component parts of that. So the clothing bins and stuff are very effective. So like Goodwill Industries, and you know, there's a whole bunch of them where you can drop off your stuff. And that stuff all gets recycled. Not as much as you would think actually gets reused as clothing. I think the number is like 35%. Most of it gets remanufactured into other cloth products or used as rags and gas stations and stuff like that, but all of that stuff does get used. I just helped organize the state's first conference 2 months ago on microplastics in the urban environment with Rutgers, and it was really interesting. because that's another, in addition to climate change, which is the, Godzilla in the closet, microplastics is a really big issue. And it was fascinating. We had 200 people, and it was kind of like an interesting blend of maybe 100 of them were PhDs. So some of it was so highly technical, like my head was exploding. It was like, it was way too much, really technical. But we also had a lot of people from industry and a lot of people from the private sector participate. And it was very interesting. And, so the bottom line elements are microplastics are pervasive in the environment. They're in everything. They're in every one of us today. So what we don't know yet, and that's really what the conference was primarily looking at, was the health effects. We really don't know the health effects yet. And the jury's really out. Some feel that there's an ability for like natural metabolism, screening, getting rid of it, and that it's not staying in our bodies and causing problems. One researcher was fascinating stuff. She actually was able to isolate and show a transfer in utero in mice from a mom to a fetus of plastics. So that's, that shows how pervasive it is in the environment. One of the more, and it's long-winded, but it's getting back to sort of your point about clothing, it was hysterical. So after 2 days of these brain-numbing technical discussions, they let the Rutgers professor emeritus, meaning she was retired, have the last word. Her name was Dr. Judith Weiss. And she basically said, all you people, keep doing what you're doing. It's really good stuff. I love what you're doing, but you're missing the boat completely. If you really want to make a difference, and she threw up a slide of a washing machine. And everybody like, what? She goes, yeah, look at your own numbers. 35%, the biggest culprit comes out from the wash, that the microfibers are coming off your clothing. So her point was, don't just get stuck in your science. Think about practical things as well. I mean, let's look at that. How long have we had dryers that collect lint? For as long as I can remember. Why can't we make a trap on washers that can collect microfibers? And then take that to the next extent. Why can't we retrofit wastewater treatment plants to be able to capture that material before it's discharged back into our environment? So that there were places, and it was so interesting. We had 2 wastewater treatment operators present, and one said we capture it all, and one said we captured none. But that's good in a way, because you're at least together. Back to my point of at least if you're talking to each other, you can sort of start to figure out, like, okay, what's real? Like, what do we really need to do? So, it's an issue we really need to address. And then the other part that's like strangely encouraging to me in this same conference, back to the $1.5 billion that industry has put up, we actually have 10 point source rivers in the world where all this gunk is still being dumped in the water. And what's good about that is we know we have a history of being able to attack and eliminate point sources. The washing machine example is actually harder unless you can come up with the technology. But if there are 10 places that are a mess, you can take the $1.5 billion and figure out a way to address that and clean it up and change it. So we got to keep talking. We got to keep trying to figure this stuff out. I think that's it. Hopefully that was what you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, sure.
Please, any other questions?
I got a question. Food waste.
Sure.
All right. What can we do as a local municipality to begin the process here before we're waiting on a bill for 50 years? Is there anything that you could recommend from our end? We have 180 food handlers.
Yeah.
Maybe we could start with them. I don't know.
Yep. So food waste, from my experience, I have yet to see a large-scale commercial food waste facility that is successful and sustainable. Okay. And the problem is putrescence. It breaks down so quickly that the odors are horrific. And when you run a big facility, and we run big facilities at Bayshore, it's volume-based. You got to get a lot of stuff, you got to move it quick, or you can't stay in business. And food, you can't move too quickly, or nature hasn't done its stuff, and it hasn't broken it down. So, from my experience, I think small-scale systems are the answer to food. It's not like everything else we've done with big box solutions, the big landfill, the mass burn incinerator. And there are technologies that are smaller scale that I think we really have to look at hard from a town perspective, or like the place where there's been most success is in community colleges and other colleges. So Kane University has the coolest food waste facility. They put it in a greenhouse in the middle of their 5 dorms. And they have about 18,000 students, I think, so it's the size of a lot of New Jersey towns. And they take all the material from 5 cafeterias. It's a very small rotary kiln, and it's actually an aerobic, meaning air is infused in the system technology. They made a deal with a local cabinet maker. So he's got clean wood shavings, because in any kind of compost, as you know, you need a bulking agent. So that's your carbon to nitrogen ratio bulking agent materials, the free wood shavings. So they get kids to take all the food, they dump it through a little grinder to make it homogeneous. They put in a certain size bucket of wood, and it sits and rotates in this tube for 1 day. And like, I've stuck my hands in it when it's coming out. It is beautiful, beautiful soil amendment material. And Kane University has the most beautiful flowers, because they just spread it all over the place. They have a farm. Because the other part of composting, not to belabor it, but it gets tough in the winter. Because like if you're running a facility, you got to take the stuff in the supermarket, as an example, every single week. So you can't say, oh, it's cold, can't take it. You got to take it. You still got to process it. You got to do something with that material, and that makes it difficult. But there's a company called 4 Solutions that spun out of the Kane digester, and they offer half-ton, 2-ton, 4-ton systems, which are very small. That could be a size that could work for a town. The other technology is called Rocket, and it's, I think the name of the company is Tidy Planet. And they have all different size rocket composters. So like the poster child is Sustainable Jersey, we have a food waste action. You might want to access that, and that gives a link to Chatham Borough, and Chatham High School installed one of these rockets, and I think it's worked well. So that's the kind of thing you can look at as a town on a small scale level that you can do a collection. The other thing just to mention, which is kind of exciting historically in the environmental field, there's been silos. So there's a garbage silo, there's hazardous waste, there's medical waste, there's sludge, there's septage. And there's never been like a cross-pollination, cross-media, they refer to it. We have one in food, where we built an extraordinarily expensive multi-gazillion-dollar wastewater treatment plants that are essentially digesters. So if you're familiar with wastewater treatment, primary treatment, basically you're just screening junk out. And then secondary treatment is biological, and then there's a 3rd level of treatment, which is tertiary or chemical. But the biological and the large wastewater treatment plants have these digesters that are utterly and completely underutilized. So we have the first one that just started operating within the past few months. Waste Management of New Jersey took an old garbage transfer station, and they converted it to a food waste processing center. So what they have, it's got a fancy name, it's called a macerator. It's a blender. It's a big blender. And they collect separated food waste, they put it in a blender, they make a pulp, they put it in a tanker truck, which is really easy, and they drive it to the joint meeting of Essex and Union Wastewater Treatment Plant, and they literally pump it into the existing capitalized, paid-for digester, and it actually improves the sludge quality. So they're maximizing the use of a piece of environmental infrastructure, and they're actually getting a higher sludge quality, because sludge really should go for beneficial use on ground if you can use it for an agricultural product. So it's a win-win. Fingers crossed that it works out, because I think it's got a real shot. Okay. Yes.
I was just wondering about regarding food waste, like what the FDA has to like their input with that as well, because I know like big corporations like aren't allowed to reuse do anything sustainable with their food, because it's been let's say it was sitting on in a sterno or under sterno heat for 2 hours, then they have to throw it away because it was out, and that's unsafe for anybody to eat or whatever. They're not allowed to reuse it, and then that's tons of food getting thrown in the garbage. So So like, that's something
Great
that they are being limited because they're under like more scrutiny from the government.
Yeah, there's
They
so
are
much
able to-
misinformation on that point. And I mentioned working on the food waste thing for 5 years. Kind of in between, we actually had a law passed. And it was Senate 3027, and it's the Food Waste Reduction Act. And it required DEP within a year to come up with a statewide master plan for reducing food. And what that really means is feeding hungry people. So just for this to stick in your mind, 40% of all food that's grown goes to waste. New Jersey is the second most affluent state in the United States behind only Maryland, with a 78,000 median income for our state, which is among the highest in the world. So we're among the most affluent places in the entire world, and 12% of New Jersey's population is food underserved. That's a disgrace. While we're throwing out 40% of our food. So this plan, and I had a chance to help work on writing it, they kind of can't get it through the chain of command to get released, but it's done, because I read it. It's good. And it's going to talk to everything that you just brought up. I'm so glad you brought up that question, because it slipped my mind, but there was a whole master plan coming out from the state to talk about breaking down those misconceptions. And what we have are a pretty significant network of like amazing private entities that collect food. And they got down to a science. So they call them donors. So the donors would be supermarkets, restaurants that abide by the rules. The only thing that the food collector has to have is a refrigerator trucked to not run afoul of government requirements. And then they have clients. And the clients are food pantries, churches, food banks, and so forth. And they do this stuff all the time. This is what they do. And they're all over the state, but they're totally disconnected. They're totally disconnected because they're like salt of the earth, local places that'll serve the ironbound community in Newark, whatever it is. So this plan, I think, is going to be the first step to try to bring together a real network. And we have a statewide goal, which is 50% reduction in food waste by 2030. So it's a pretty aggressive goal. And working with that guy, Senator Smith, to try to address the landfill ban piece, he actually put in requirements to make the timeframes even faster, to try to put more pressure on. So hopefully that plan is going to be out in this summer, in the next couple of months, and we can all look at it together and figure out a way to, it's really a lot of it's misconceptions, like the expiration date is nonsense.
But what if it's like a corporation that is like national, like if it's a state legislation and then it's a national corporation, then do they have to follow the same?
They have to follow the
Like,
state.
doesn't matter,
And it's
like,
not-
I just wasn't sure how that works, like if there was like. because
Yeah,
it's
this one
national.
is soft. So like you have, like when I was at DEP, we wrote regulatory programs that were hard, meaning that if you whack a wetland to expand your dock, you're gonna get fined and you're gonna have to rip out the dock, And if you're really bad, you go to jail. These are really soft programs, so it's more education.
Right.
So nobody's gonna have to do it, but hopefully the national corporation would participate in this kind of thing. It's getting the information out. What people want is no liability.
Yeah.
They don't want to get in trouble.
Like where it worked was at Topgolf.
Yeah.
And
Oh, that's
that's what I'm
great.
talking about, where they would do stuff like that. Like we would even get like in a lot of trouble if we personally tried to take home some food that was like left over from an event, because they were like so strict about no one was able to eat it. But then they said that there was locations in Texas that were able to give their leftover food to like pig farms, because then it would be their slop or whatever you call it.
That's
Like,
exactly
they would
right.
eat it.
That's exactly where it
So
works.
that's
That's
like,
right. Yeah.
I don't know what's
Yeah.
going on in New Jersey, but.
Absolutely, and that's the power that what I said a number of times. I wish the state would take more leadership, because when the state says something, it takes the liability away, and people are like, oh, okay, the state says it's okay. All right, don't we do that all the times in our lives? Well, they said it's okay to eat, right? And hopefully we can break down a lot of those problems, because most of it is nonsense.
Mhm.
Like there's stuff you can't do, but most of the food you can use. And ugly food, farms, we call it ugly food, but it's got a blemish. The farms throw it out.
Right. Disgusting.
It's crazy.
Doesn't the Good Samaritan law like protect
Yeah.
against the
That's exactly right. There's actually a immunity. So it's the opposite of getting in trouble. There's a in-government signed law immunity that you won't get in trouble. But you have to do, certain things, right? You can't like give people wrong food. But
Yeah, like I volunteer with Food Not Bombs, so we collect basically anything that nobody wants to sell. And a lot of times, we'll get a container of berries that half the berries are inedible, but we tell people there's some good berries if you want it, you have to sort through it, but it's free.
Yeah.
And they're organic, so instead of paying $7 for a thing of strawberries, here's half a thing that you could eat and it's free.
See, that's great.
They can't afford.
And if you have a compost, you can just put half of it.
Exactly, and we also collect for the compost too, because a lot of our members compost and so.
Wait, what's the
That's
name of
great.
Food Not Bombs.
that? Food Not Bombs.
Yeah, there's a Jersey Shore chapter in Asbury Park that we set up every Sunday. We collect
Excellent.
that, we'll collect the beans and the farmer's market and anything that we can't, like we're a vegan distribution, and so anything that we don't distribute at our share, we'll bring to like the mission and they feed their people with it, and like they know exactly where it's coming from. They're totally fine with it, they're happy. Feed a lot of people that way.
And that's what I'm hoping, like, this was a live
Yeah.
example, because like, you're doing this,
Yeah.
right? But like in the next town, do you know what they're doing? Maybe not.
Yeah.
If we could just get the metrics together of who's doing what, and then you can figure out, do a gap analysis, where are people underserved and is nobody doing it, try to entice people to come in and start doing it.
And like a lot of people do care about the liability, like there's a lot of turnover at like Dean, so the new managers that come in don't know that they can just give us their expired stuff and
Yeah.
nobody's gonna come back to them like, hey, you gave us something that's not good.
Yeah.
It's just.
Good Samaritan Act.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool, doing it. So, listen, thank you very much for an opportunity to speak with you. This is really fun, it's a great discussion. I just wish we could get the legislature to do the same thing. But we will.
And that was a perfect ending segue to next month's, which is, again, Composting 101. So if anyone's interested in more of that, we do have Tom Matulowicz from the Rutgers Master Gardeners coming in. Just a couple other things I wanted to mention. This program is co-sponsored by the Green Team. If you want to be on the Green Team, Nancy's a good person to talk to. But yeah, and then the other thing is Mackenzie has actually just started a jogging club at Red Bank. They're eventually going to do plogging, which is actually you jog and you clean stuff up around town while you're doing it. So that is the first and last Saturday of the month at 9 a.m. So I guess that's next weekend, I think. But yeah, just round of applause for Gary. I really appreciate it. If you leave your email, we'll let you know when there are more events like these at the library. So thank you, everyone.
Pleasure, man.